Welcome to the lesson on globalization, development, and society. Today's module is Contested Nature of Social Security in Globalizing India. In today's lesson, we'll start by interrogating the state in terms of social security. Let's understand what is the nature of a state within a neoliberal political economy. The key points to be noted are all national politics are market driven. Next, one way of dealing with the challenges involving cutting down of taxes and social security benefits. Third, government have found their capacity to intervene in the domestic economy significantly altered. Next, the government now wants to survive in office must increasingly manage national politics in such a manner so as to address the pressure of transnational market forces. The major challenges before the government is to address the contradiction between social needs of the public and the interest of the globalized capital. What has happened is that capital mobility has forced the national government to design policies that are not only sensitive to market sentiment but also to regulatory demands of transnational corporation. Within the neoliberal state, there is a visible shift of the balance in power from citizens to the global capital. Thus, on the one hand, one can observe the vastly improved powers of the global market forces, which reshapes the social relations of production in all countries, and on the other, downsizing of the state and converting the public sector into a space for capital accumulation, and reducing government accountability to the electorate. There is a marked shift in the division of national income between capital and labor. It is a situation where the less skilled workers reveal a decline in real wages, casualization and higher unemployment, but the value of highly skilled labor increases greatly, putting them in demand. Such a process reveals patterns of inequality and disparities of power. Now let's understand what do we mean when we use the term social security. Social security could be referred to as a public action by the state to protect the poor and vulnerable from adverse changes in living standard. It includes employment and income guarantee, assistance to credit, social insurance, unemployment benefit, pensions, and family allowances. The idea of social security is based on a public policy specially designed and implemented by government and local authorities and community-based association. Kabir states that, and I quote, the deregulation of the labor markets across the world, accompanied by reduction in social security provision where these existed, have served to make labor markets increasingly informal and to turn labor into an extremely flexible resources that can be hired and fired in response to the market signal. Dres and Sen define social security as, the quote begins, the basic idea of social security is to use social means to prevent deprivation and vulnerability to the deprivation in order to ensure sustainable human development over time. What are the challenges of gendering of social security? This is an important theme which we must keep in mind while the debate goes on. The approach of social security policy is rather short-term elevation of income poverty and provision of safety nets. Social security is yet to fully realize its potential to address the underlying causes of vulnerability and inequality. One needs a gender-sensitive approach to social security. Women have culturally and socially ascribed roles and responsibility and thus have fewer income and asset generation opportunities, but also face greater social risk and vulnerabilities. Women are represented disproportionately among the poor, with poor women and girls most likely to experience lifelong poverty as a consequence of gender inequality and discrimination. The argument of Holmes and Jones for gender-sensitive approach is based upon two indicators. Gender equality is a basic human right and greater gender equality. One should recognize that gender inequality persists as a result of multiple constraints such as institutional bias, embedded socio-cultural norms, and gender role. Thus, promoting gender equity requires that poverty reduction measure not only increase income but also tackle social causes of poverty and vulnerability. Some facts about the workforce in India. Let's try and understand what is the nature of workforce in India. India has a large workforce that is devoid of any protection and security, and its vulnerability is heightened by the fact that economy is defined with jobless growth. What is the nature of this workforce? 86% of the total workers are in the informal sector. Self-employment is the dominant form of employment in the Indian economy, where the main worker is assisted by unpaid family labor. Casual labor is the next largest category, defined by low wages and irregular work. Laborers face short and long period of unemployment, with work being of seasonal nature. In this category, workers are defined as vulnerable, as apart from low wages and irregular employment, the conditions of employment are often terrible, with no basic amenities, and in many cases one can see a prevalence of bonded labor. Informal sector is dominated by women, especially belonging to scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. These groups work under great wage disparities at jobs requiring low level of skills and education, thus are poorly paid and uncertain. There has been an increase in short duration seasonal circular migration workers. Unorganized worker consists of those working in the unorganized enterprise or household, excluding regular worker with social security benefit, and the workers in the formal sector without any employment social security benefit provided by the employers. The informal workforce does not enjoy employment security, that is, no protection against arbitrary dismissal, work security, no protection against accident and health risk at the workplace, and social security, maternity and health benefit, pension, etc. are denied to them. The major causes of vulnerability is not only the fact of economic insecurity, but such a position is rendered more vulnerable by their social identity determined by caste, which fixes people at the bottom of the social hierarchy. Who are the poor and the vulnerable? The laboring poor primarily belong to the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribe, members of the Muslim community and other communities that are classified as other backward classes. The group faces multiple levels of vulnerability. Workers work under conditions where there is an absence of labor contract, there is a non-implementation of labor law such as minimum wages, and their condition of poverty is rendered worse by their lack of agency and representation. Bremen argues that infinite absorption capacity of the informal sector is a myth. The supply of labor is far in excess to the structural demand for this factor of production, and this fact explains why a bottom segment of land poor and landless peasants do not drift around freely in the labor market, but remain caught up as a casualized workforce bonded in debt. In such situation, the social security program and policy initiated by the government becomes crucial in the sustenance of poor in India. The government, as a part of strategy, introduced three schemes: the provision of employment in public work, a package of contingent social security including health insurance and social benefit for the non-laboring poor. National Commission has outlined leveling up strategy, which includes decent employment right and introduction of social floor of labor rights as standards that include introduction of a national minimum wage, minimum conditions of work, and provision of social security. Though not adequate, such provisioning helps dealing with extreme marginality. What are the shortcomings of this program which we discussed just now? The programs were non-legislated benefit to public employee, forming a minuscule percentage of the population. Such an approach is deeply flawed, as they do not include any social security scheme for the majority of the workers in the unorganized sectors. The biggest gap within the social security policy in India is lack of social protection for the working poor. Kabir argues that in majority of the developing country, social security measures were available to small male-dominated section of the workforce employed in the public and private sectors of the economy. In this context, a vast majority of workers, both men and predominantly women, were building their livelihood in the informal economy with almost no statutory benefits and were largely invisible in the official records. Further, such interventions were challenged with the institutionalizing of neoliberal ideologies that emphasized free market and liberalized economy, and the downsizing of welfare regime, which led to the reframing of social security policies within the developing country, making it more specific and targeted. Thus, the programs are merely piecemeal effort. What has been the state response? The government has signed the NCEUS report. According to Brahman, the approach of the government is to initiate populist policy without addressing the structural causes, the underlying causes. Any NCEUS in their report commented that the Unorganized Workers Social Security Act, UWSSA 2008 does not provide for a national minimum social security for all unorganized, that is informal, workers. Neither has it had an independent body at the national or state level, nor a fund for financing the proposed national minimum social security. The NCEUS states category that the politics of economic inclusion has yet to catch up with the politics of inclusion. The disconnect between the dominance of neoliberal orthodoxy in economic policy and the yearning of the vast majority for a life of work with dignity and security is getting increasingly glaring in a fast-growing India. Let's do an analysis of a very popular act, which is the Manrega, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. Manrega is an Indian law and social security measure that aims to guarantee the right to work. It is a landmark program for providing employment security to the laboring poor. The need of such program was argued for by the National Commission on Rural Labour as far back as 1991, as the need was felt to provide adequate social security to the rural labour. A rural public work program that was initiated by Government of India to provide guaranteed employment with minimum wages. It is important to recognize that Manrega was inspired by EGS, Employment Guarantee Scheme of the Government of Maharashtra, initiated in 1977. As a public work program that provides employment security, the Manrega includes provisions such as guaranteed employment for the applicant, 100 days per household, universal coverage, time-bound extension throughout rural India, assured minimum wages, and full transparency of the records. Bremen and Kannan state that Manrega was the flagship initiative program of National Common Minimum Program of the United Progressive Alliance UPA government when it came to the power in 2004. Employment Guarantee Scheme. The EGS is a law which guarantees work where the state has to provide work on demand and also include provisions such as equal minimum wages for men and women, creches, drinking water, and sanitation facility at work sites. Observation and research on the program reveals that EGS has attracted unskilled labor force but has failed to provide any form of training to these unskilled labor forces, including women. The families continue to depend heavily on the scheme for unemployment and income even after decades of its existence. The program plays a crucial role in thwarting hunger but fails to provide means to slowly build their lives within a more secure and stabilized livelihood that is sustainable. The EGS program works rather at meeting immediate crises and is not designed towards building long-term sustainable livelihood opportunities. The nature of public works to be performed under the program. We are now going to do an analysis of Manrega. Bremen and Kannan state that public work came to be perceived as employment invested in infrastructural, agricultural projects such as land leveling, doffing of bore wells, construction of irrigation canal and rural roads, bunding and building of check dams. Further, the construction was to be done on public land owned by the panchayats or community-owned collective property and later on the land of small and marginal farmer, beginning with those belonging to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. Public infrastructure under the program. Bremen and Kannan state the upgrading of slum settlement inhabited by them, which includes house construction, building of access road, street lighting, sanitation via construction of sewers, arranging for tap water, garbage disposal, etc., tended to be looked upon as outside the ambit of public work. This illustrates why more than half of the rural poor still have to go to the open fields around the tenement for defecation and why the most denigrated castes beyond the pale are still involved in manual scavenging. This still happens when manual scavenging has been banned in India by the government of India. The analysis reveals that the definition of the public work has not moved beyond a point, and we need to question to what extent has program helped to strengthen the infrastructure within the rural economy. The key factors of this program are use of decentralized institution mechanism to implement the program. The Act uses Panchayati Raj institution which did the planning so that an organic link between the two program and the local demands are addressed. Promotion of sustainable development of the rural economy through generation of productive assets. This program operates on a 40-60 ratio where the state government provides funding for 1/4 of the material cost, including the wages of skilled and semi-skilled laborer, and the remaining expenditure on material and wages to the unskilled labor force used to be paid by the union government. Targeting women with a stipulation that 1/3 of the workforce will be a woman is a welcome step. In Manrega, there is a provision of creche for the children along with other facilities of shade, water and first aid. Manrega makes restricted use of machines and contractor along with providing the medical and the accidental. The Act devised certain built-in mechanism to ensure transparency and accountability. It has made use of decentralized democracy and has authorized Gram Sabhas to conduct regular social audits of the projects undertaken and has provision for grievance redressal through institution of ombudsman at the district level. But this has yet to be implemented or the benefit going to the Manrega worker. As Kanan and Jain state that it is a major intervention for ameliorating the economic plight of the working poor in India. Kanan and Jain argue that Manrega would contribute to alleviating poverty had been the enhanced employment of women, inclusion of workers belonging to the socially deprived communities, and the construction of assets on the land of the poor family. What are the major contributions of Manrega? They are alleviating poverty, enhancing labor participation of women, social inclusion, assets creation, reduction in distress migration. Additionally, it is notable that National Rural Employment Guarantee earning improved food security as it enabled the household to buy large quantities of food which was cheaper and ensured long-term security. There has been a tilt towards diet diversification, shift from cereal-dominated food habits and an improvement in access to credit, especially to meet food-relaxed expenditure. Gill argues that in Punjab, provision of additional employment under the Manrega to the SC landless families, especially during the lean seasons, had strengthened their livelihood security and protected them from the experience of poverty, although such experiences are not always universal. What is also interesting is that there has been an enhancement of collective bargaining and strength and an augmentation of workers' banking capabilities. What are the challenges in implementing Manrega? The primary challenges are, in some states such as Odisha, Manrega could not take a dent on poverty due to the inadequate, delayed and erratic nature of employment and irregular and delayed wage payment. There was a prevalence of institutional bottleneck. For instance, the prevalence of village level politics acted as a formidable barrier in the proper implementation of program. In some cases, the creation of assets did not reach its target as there was a lack of comprehensive and systematic planning in the selection of projects, which has lowered the potential benefit of the scheme. Increased problem of misreporting and corruption, where projects are seen on the paper but not in the real. Limited generation of mandates under the program also contributed to its difficulty. Here, the access to employment remained conditional upon availability of work rather than as a right. Dres reported that in Odisha, there was an acute shortage of staff from top to bottom. Let's now examine the major lacunae in the program. Manrega is limited in its design as well as implementation. There was no need to set a limit of 100 days of work, as the demand for work was confined to the manual work and only the poorer households would be attracted. The fact that there is a limited implementation resulting in about a half of the permissible days of work reflects the fact that there is either a lack of strong political commitment or weak implementation machinery, or a combination of both. Delay in wage payment decreases the bargaining power of the household, as they do not have the capital to handle the daily household expenses. It is important to converge Manrega with other rural capital formation projects so as to enhance rural capital formation, especially in areas of land and water resource management and development. Need for a better political commitment at the state level so that there is more effective performance. To conclude, one can say that the Manrega needs to re-engage with the poverty line debate. The first aspect is re-engaging with the debate on poverty line. According to Brahman and Kanan, the official poverty line has a quite low threshold which excludes a large proportion of people who are vulnerable and deprived. Exclusion of marginalized. Secondly, a large number of poor and vulnerable are excluded from the existing social security schemes. Need for a macro policy. Thirdly, the need for a macro social policy is argued for, which would provide an umbrella perspective on social security interventions in India. Social security policy to be made universalized. Fourth, the need for universalization of social security provisions. It is important to recognize that limiting social security provision to the ultra poor could end up in perpetuation of rent seeking at the lower levels of bureaucracy. Social security definitely needs to be prioritized big time. Fifth, one needs to address social security's policy with a sense of deep urgency. In conclusion, the crisis of socio-economic vulnerability is huge and requires an immediate basis of policy that would not allow any wage below the minimum of wages, ensure minimum conditions of work, guarantee national minimum social security to meet contingencies and eventualities for workers in the informal sector to meet their needs. Most importantly, social security for the non-laboring poor, the destitute, and the differentially able must be central to any further design or refashioning or improvement in the existing Manrega program. Thank you.